Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
The Azan, the Muslim call for prayer. It is repeated 5 times a day from the minarets of mosques, calling all believers to come and answer the call of God. But this is not Cairo or Damascus, or any Muslim city. This is Harlem, New York.
And here, the Azan is repeated 5 times a day from 2 totally different places. Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is run by African immigrants from the west part of the Dark Continent, and the Malcolm Shabazz Mosque, which is run by Afro-American Muslims. 2 mosques, same neighborhood, same ethnic group, same religious faith, and yet 2 totally different communities. Why are they so apart from each other?
I came to New York to study filmmaking. When I first settled in an apartment in the west part of Harlem, that's when I found out about those 2 different mosques. But I decided to start my research from a 3rd mosque that serves as an intermediate between the 2. The Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood is neither African nor Afro-American, but rather it's open to every ethnic group you can think of. The mosque is currently run by Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, one of the key Muslim figures here in Harlem.
Being a Muslim is about being dutiful. Dutiful in your prayers, not lackadaisical. Dutiful in your giving, fi sabilillah. Dutiful in trying to make Hajj. Some of us haven't been on Hajj yet, have the means to make Hajj. I mean, don't have the means. And haven't been on Hajj, but been to Hawaii and Senegal and Japan and wherever else, haven't been on Hajj yet. And you know what? You know Allah's not going to ask you about any of those other places, man. When the angels pull open the book and look in there, they're not going to say, oh, Allah, subhanallah, he went to Hawaii.
To many of those, Imam Talib is more than just a religious figure. He is a man on a mission.
You know, as the African American and continental African community in Harlem has grown and continues to grow, those of us who are Muslim leaders in Harlem, we felt a need to create a kind of formal network wherein we could, come together, discuss situations and find ways to work together and discuss problems, create a relationship between our congregations so as to be able to better serve the Muslims here in Harlem.
The same goal is shared by this young Muslim activist. Shaka Shakur is a member of the United Muslim Alliance, an organization dedicated to uniting the Muslim community.
The object of the United Muslim Alliance is pretty self-explanatory. On the first part, to bring the Muslims together, in particularly the African/American Muslim and the African Muslim abroad, because that's a particular part of Islam that seems to be undocumented. There's a lot of holes, a lot of things missing. So because this country really doesn't educate on a cross level, we tend to say, okay, we're both Muslim, we're both black, but we got our mosque, you got yours.
One of the mosques Shaka is referring to is this mosque here at 116th Street, Al-Aqsa Mosque. The first time I came here, I felt identified with the people, not just because they are fellow Muslim, but also because they are fellow Africans.
We as an immigrant from Africa, new to this system and this society, we didn't know anything about America or Harlem, and we start coming here. That's when we start mobilizing our people, our brothers and sisters, so that we can come together to establish our own masajid.
Imam Sulaiman Kunati is the current Imam of the mosque. Born in Ivory Coast, he is fluent in 3 different languages: Arabic, English, and French. He is seen by his society, the Society of African Immigrants, as a community leader. Kunati uses the mosque as a center for mobilizing and improving the community.
And not only that, we have 7 or 5 masajid here today in Harlem area belong to African society, community.
As I sat in the Aqsa Mosque, I wondered if it's just a coincidence that the very first Azan was performed also by an African. In the 7th century AD, when the Prophet Muhammad immigrated from Mecca to the city of Medina, he assigned one of his followers, an Abyssinian freed slave named Bilal, to be the first ever caller for prayers.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Today, 1400 years later, Muslims around the world call for prayer in the tradition of Bilal.
La ilaha illallah.
While waiting for a reply from the Malcolm Shabazz Mosque to participate in my film, I decided to search on my own for an answer to one specific question. Why is it that although we share a common face, a common neighborhood, and even a common background, that we have 2 different mosques? How did we come to this point? In an attempt to answer that question, I did what I do best. I resorted to literature. In his masterpiece, Roots, author Alex Haley uses the term Allah quite frequently, probably to refer to the Muslim roots of his main character, Kunta Kinte.
Allah is Allah. There is no God but Allah.
Although Roots is a work of fiction, yet it is based on a historical fact. The very first Muslims didn't come to America on the Mayflower or the Santa Maria, but rather they came on a different kind of ships.
You know, that's just a fictionalized account of the history of their family. I mean, Kunta Kinte was a real person. Kunta Kinte was one of millions of West African Muslims who were brought here. In his case, he was from Gambia. He was brought to America via a port in Maryland. So that entire region of the South was a port of entry for many Muslims from West Africa.
And also, during the slavery trade, the people who came here, most of them were Muslims. So since then, you know, America discovered Islam.
And when you listen to the stories of the slaves, you will see that they're praying 5 times a day. They're making wudu. In some cases, they even have zikr beads. I think there's one I read in particular in a book in Atlanta when I was at the Black Holocaust Museum. The little girl is describing her grandmother's activities, and she's saying that Granny always talks to the sun 5 times a day. You know, that Granny keeps her rag on her head. It's hot out here. Why she got that rag on her head? Then it's, you know, Granny always carries a rope with a bunch of knots in it, and she stayed talking to that rope. You know, but we know that's zikring. We know that everything she was doing was from Islam.
By the end of the Civil War in 1865, a wave of liberated slaves immigrated from the south to the north. Many of them were Muslims, and many of those settled right here in Harlem, New York.
One of the things that we find is that as of the 1920s forward, that all of a sudden African American groups, organizations, and communities identifying themselves as Muslims start popping up in all of the major urban northern cities, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, etc. And Harlem, of course, being, as it is popularly known, the Mecca of Black America, has always been a place where there's been some degree of Muslim presence.
By the half of the 20th century, Harlem was home for many radical ideas for change, one of which is the Nation of Islam, led by Elijah Muhammad. The nation's representative in Harlem was a resident of Harlem, a young man by the name of Malik al-Shabazz, or Malcolm X. It was back in the early 1950s when Malcolm X arrived here in Harlem. This ex-convict was now a member of the Nation of Islam that was founded by Elijah Muhammad, and he was chosen by Muhammad as a minister of the nation. Needless to say, the impact the nation had on him was great, but the impact Malcolm would have on Harlem and the Afro-American community in general would be even greater.
I have a desire to see the Afro-American in this country get the human rights that are his due. I believe that the Islam religion is the best religion for our people because it creates unity and it gives one dignity and racial confidence and all of these things that are necessary to make a complete human being.
I think what the Nation of Islam, the advantage that the Nation of Islam had over other groups before it was that the Nation of Islam began to really emerge to prominence at a time when Black America as a whole was beginning to emerge and press the struggle for civil and human rights.
It is safe to say that Elijah Muhammad created his own interpretation of Islam, calling himself the messenger of Allah to the black man to rid him of the evils of the white man. Yet, Malcolm X was soon to discover another interpretation of Islam.
Says Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, after he became Muslim, went to Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and visited many African countries. So he discovered the real meaning of Islam.
In 1964, Malcolm started a pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, a journey that would change his view as well as many of his convictions.
When I was on the pilgrimage, I had close contact with Muslims whose skin would in America be classified as white, and with Muslims who themselves would be classified as white in America. But these particular Muslims didn't call themselves white. They looked upon themselves as human beings, as part of the human family, and therefore they looked upon all other segments of the human family as part of that same family. Now, they had a different look or a different air or a different attitude than that which is reflected in the attitude of the man in America who calls himself white. So I said that if Islam had done that for them, perhaps if the white man in America would study Islam, perhaps it could do the same thing for him.
Malcolm was shot, but his legacy continued.
Immediately after the martyrdom of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, he was martyred in February of 1965. By 1967, there was an explosion of interest in Islam, in Sunni Islam, that erupted in the African-American community.
We take a lot of our philosophies from Brother Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, rahmatullahi alayhi. He spent a lot of time in Africa, and he developed this relationship between the African newly independent states and the American black in their struggle.
If you listen to Malcolm's speech, he always spoke about unity. Malcolm was about unity among Muslims, in general.
So why is it does the gap still continue to exist between those two mosques?
Well, most of it is cultural, being that the African in America, because I tend to not say African American, the African in America, we are African, but we have adapted a new culture because of our existence here in this hemisphere. And then the traditional African coming abroad has maintained the African culture.
As continental African Muslim immigrants, began coming here. At first, they came here and to Malcolm Shabazz, and their numbers kept growing. And as they themselves explained to me, the brothers explained to me, one group, when they came and asked my permission to leave and open up a masjid, which became Masjid al-Aqsa, by the way. They explained to me that many of them were from the same villages in Africa. They have common language. Many of them don't even speak English, you know, so they felt a need to just group together with other Muslims whom they had a lot of cultural commonality.
For your knowledge, all of us, we used to pray at Malcolm Shabazz Mosque. Some of us used to go to 113 where MIB, Masjid of Islamic Brotherhood. Because there was an Imam, Sheikh Rashid, who was the Imam of Malcolm Shabazz Mosque. Beautiful brother, good brother with Africans. When Imam Rashid passed away, they start pushing out Africans. You come to the masjid, they don't let you in. They say that no, because the t-shirt you are wearing, we don't want it here, or masjid is full up, is packed, so go to somewhere else. Since we open this place, that's it. Nobody don't even go there no more.
What Imam Sulaiman said made me try to contact the Malcolm Shabazz Mosque and get a comment from them.
So we're standing right in front of the Malik Shabazz Mosque right now. I just received an email saying that they won't be able to cooperate with this film project. No reason was given.
After that day, my research took another turn. I decided to focus more on the two communities rather than on the two mosques, on their commonalities rather than their differences, on what brings them together rather than what separates them.
Okay, so I've been doing research for over a week now, and one of the things we found out through this research, we found this picture of Malcolm X during his visit to Africa in the 1960s, actually dressed in the national or traditional African costume. Also, we found several quotations by Malcolm talking about the struggle for liberation in Africa and the struggle by the Afro-American community here as one, as undivided, which make us, wonder if the legacy of Malcolm X can be the bridge that brings the two communities together.
To find an answer to that question, I'm here at the Shabazz Center, a memorial center dedicated to Malcolm X and his wife Patty Shabazz. I'm joined by the center's director, Ron Lawson, who explains to me what the place is all about.
This is a unique area here because this is actually segments of the stage that Malcolm X was speaking from, and this is the location of where he fell the day he was martyred. We want to make this a more fitting memorial, but at this point in time, this is a sacred space, as all of this is a sacred space to honor him and Dr. Betty Shabazz.
But I was interested in one specific picture.
There's a photograph of him that's on our brochure that shows him in